Happy Friday. Welcome back. Today we're going to be previewing South Carolina's opponent for Week 7, Alabama. I'm Karenna Porter. I'm joined by Jack Veltri. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Karenna?
Can't complain. Excited for the weekend. Last
Yeah,
weekend was a great weekend for college football, so
not for
hoping to
South
see
Carolina
some
though, unfortunately. So
not not for South Carolina, but it was very entertaining. So
not for Alabama either. But you know what? It's gonna hopefully be a better game on both sides this weekend. Hopefully, a more competitive game. Because South Carolina obviously struggled a lot, but then again, Alabama also is coming off a disastrous type of loss to Vanderbilt, who honestly I don't think anyone was ever really expecting a team like Alabama, just known for winning over the years, to lose to a team that is basically at the bottom of the SEC totem pole in Vanderbilt. So should be an interesting matchup, but we'll have to see how it goes.
yeah, I agree. I think like Ole Miss, they're going to come in being really mad coming off that loss to Vandy, but I think South Carolina is also going to come in being mad. Do you think that's going to play into what we're going to see on Saturday?
Yeah, I think you certainly hope so. I think you definitely want. I know we know Alabama is going to be really ticked off coming into this game. I would expect that to be the case, even though head coach Kalen DeBoer kind of has more of a, I don't want to like kind of like a laid back attitude. Nothing is going to be on the level of Nick Saban. I mean, we've seen his epic meltdowns over the years in games and stuff. Kalen DeBoer just doesn't seem to be that type of coach. Not saying that's a bad thing, but I would definitely expect Alabama at the very least to be more prepared coming into this game for sure and not, overlooking anyone. I would say they're going to be much more focused. And for South Carolina, I kind of hope they come out playing with a little bit more intensity, a little bit more of, I don't know what the right word is, but a little bit more fire, I think, is the way to go. Something to prove because you put up 3 points on offense last week against Ole Miss, and your defense did a pretty good job. But outside of that, the coaching decisions were kind of bad at times, and a lot of mistakes were made. So you hope South Carolina comes out a lot more ready to go. Not 2 weeks off from a bye week here. It's straight into a really important 2 week road trip right after you lost by 24 points last week.
This is South Carolina's first meeting with Alabama in Tuscaloosa since 2009. Alabama currently has 8 wins. South Carolina only has 1 in Bryant-Denny. You think that's going to contribute to the feelings going into the game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough road environment for South Carolina, Karenna. I think no matter where you go in the SEC, even Vanderbilt now, it's going to be a tough game no matter where you play. And obviously, over the years, I know it doesn't have a real impact on the game at hand this weekend, but if history shows anything, Alabama's normally been able to take care of business against South Carolina at their home stadium, and that's not much of a surprise. I mean, Bryant-Denny is probably one of the loudest, most intimidating environments in college football. That said, this is going to be for Alabama people. It's going to be a 11 a.m. kickoff. For us, it'll be a noon kickoff. So it's going to be an early game, regardless. And I'm very interested to see how the Crimson Tide fans show up after a loss. A loss like that to Vanderbilt obviously cannot really get you hyped up. And a game against South Carolina definitely does not make you want to go out and check out the Crimson Tide after a game like that. But I will say I do think either way should be a good crowd. Alabama normally packs it out even after these bad games they have rarely from time to time, but I do think it's going to be a challenge for South Carolina. And they're gonna have to come out ready to playing their A game. I don't even know if their A game is going to be enough. They're going to really have to play their best football of the season that we have yet to see so far.
Yeah, I'm kind of scared for that morale in the South Carolina locker room. The ESPN matchup predictor, they have Alabama at 91.9% advantage. So
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, Alabama's gonna be. Let's just address the elephant in the room. Like, Alabama's gonna be heavily favored in this game, and that's no surprise. Like, even though they just lost, like I said, their worst game of the season, it is still Alabama that we're talking about here. Nick Saban, Kalen DeBoer, put whoever you want out there. The name is intimidating enough, and I think South Carolina maybe can use this to their advantage, right? Heavy underdog, everyone counting them out. Think of it kind of like when back in 2022, the Gamecocks had just come off that awful loss in Gainesville to Florida. They had lost that game like 38-6. And then what happened the next week? They were back at home, big underdogs, and they beat Tennessee, who was number 5 at the time. 63-38. And that really turned the season around for South Carolina. So maybe that's kind of what they need again to kind of get the mojo flowing, get everyone back on the train of like, hey, this season's not over yet. And there's a long way to go, but we're on the right track here.
Yeah, something we talked about with Ole Miss last week, we assumed that it would be two high-powered offenses kind of going head-to-head, but that obviously is not what happened. Do you think we're going to see a little bit more of that this week with Alabama being number 8 in the country for scoring offense?
Yeah, I definitely think I don't see any issues with Alabama putting up points in this game. I think despite the fact that, they lost, they still put up 35 points. I mean, it was a great performance offensively speaking for the most part. You get your normal Jalen Milroe, really good performance throwing the football now. He's obviously a great runner, as we know. The run game was pretty good for Alabama. Jam Miller played pretty well in that game. Justice Haynes. They obviously have Jeremy Bernard, too. I will say Ryan Williams continues to play well. So I definitely do think Alabama is going to be able to score plenty in this game. I just wonder if, South Carolina had made so much progress week after week through the first month of the season. I ended up with a 50-point performance against Akron to close out September before the bye week. And then you come out of the bye week with 2 weeks of preparation. You're thinking, okay, like South Carolina's, what are they going to do next? Because it's got to be another step forward, right? And it wasn't. It was only 3 points of offense. And that is nowhere near good enough in this conference. So I think for Carolina, they kind of need to figure out how they're going to get back to scoring that many points. And what do I mean by that? It's about correcting all the issues that went wrong. And I don't think you're going to be able to correct everything in this game. I mean, it's simple as Lenore Sellers has to throw the football better at times. His receivers have to get open. His offensive line needs to block. The run game needs to continue to be better. And you have to limit the penalties, the turnovers, the sacks. So it's so many different things that South Carolina has kind of compounded on itself right now that it's not going to be an overnight fix. And I don't truly expect it to be fixed going into this game. But I do think we need to see some signs of progress in this game, and that not all hope is lost with this offense, which I think a lot of people are definitely feeling that way right now, that there's not much light at the end of the tunnel for this offense in Dow Loggins right now.
Alabama obviously heavily favored over Vandy. What do you think went wrong in that game?
Yeah, so in case you missed it, Alabama suffered as we've talked about by now, a 40-35 loss against Vanderbilt, and probably, I would say, at least in our lifetime, probably one of the biggest upsets in college football history, just because Vanderbilt, as we have known by this point, is the bottom feeder in the SEC, and Alabama has always been the king of the crop in college football, the best team out there, and they were number one going into this game because they had just come off that big win over Georgia 2 weeks ago. And I think the thing that we learned in this game is Alabama's defense has a ton of weaknesses, right? Diego Pavia, quarterback for Vanderbilt, played really well in this game, 16 of 20 passing, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, completed 80% of his passes. That is really good. The run game was pretty good in this game. I think they made key plays at different times in this game. And I think the big thing that stands out is the third down conversions. I mean, Vanderbilt went 12 of 18 on third down in this game. They went 1 of 1 on fourth down. They ran 75 plays of offense compared to Alabama's 46. And it's reflected in the numbers that Alabama only had the ball for nearly 18 minutes in this game, while Vanderbilt had it for more than 42 minutes. So time of possession is not everything, but it's a significant number to look at. You can't really overlook it in the fact that Alabama just didn't have the ball for that long in this game, yet they ended up scoring 35 points. But Vanderbilt was able to outdo them just a little bit. And it shows. I mean, look, I don't think they had a 3-and-out in this game. They had a lot of long, sustainable drives that ended up going into the end zone. So you have to give credit where it's due. Even though no one expected this game to happen for Vanderbilt, coming out with a win, the biggest in their program history, it was still a really gutsy type of performance that they led from start to finish in this game, and they never looked back. And there are a lot of points in this game where you thought, oh, Alabama's going to turn it on and Vanderbilt will kind of slow down. It's a nice story, but things will change at some point. That just never ended up happening. And it's not like Alabama played particularly bad. I mean, honestly, there were some plays that were kind of fluky in this game. Jalen Milroe threw a pick that got batted up in the air, and Vanderbilt came down with it and ran the other way for a pick six. So that ends up being the difference in this game when you look at a 5-point differential. And, I mean, Milroe threw for over 300 yards. Like I said before, Jam Miller had 2 touchdowns on the ground. Milroe had a touchdown on the ground as well. Jeremy Bernard had a nice day through the air. as a receiver out there, even though he's a running back. Ryan Williams, the 17-year-old, had a touchdown in this game. So it's not like Alabama played bad by any means. Again, it's just the offense gave up 40 points to Vanderbilt, for crying out loud. That's where the issues lie in this game. And so that is probably the number one concern for a lot of Alabama fans. And probably if you're a South Carolina fan, you're looking at ways like how can South Carolina kind of exploit what Vanderbilt did in those same ways. And maybe they're able to. It kind of starts with Lenore Sellers because he's a similar quarterback to Diego Pavia in the fact of he's a big physical guy that isn't afraid to take hits and stuff. And I think it's going to really come down to Sellers being able to make the key throws when needed. But again, his receivers have to get open and stuff. And if I were South Carolina, I would try to copy this game plan as best as possible because you have some similar players out there that can do similar things.
Yeah, obviously Sellers is going to be a big part about that road to victory if there is one there for South Carolina. But I think the defense can play a key role in this too. Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, and Nick Emanwari are all looking really good.
I think for this defense, they played very well in this game against Ole Miss despite the penalties. Like they had 4 offsides penalties. Obviously, Dylan Stewart had the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. But outside of that, I mean, they played pretty well. You held Ole Miss to 27 points, which I think in most cases is good enough to go out there and try to win a football game. It's just your offense had no answers on their end of the bargain. So I think that was an issue for South Carolina's offense to not be able to really respond and help out the defense in any way. But, I mean, the defense, for the most part, did its job. I mean, yeah, did you give up a few big plays here and there? Of course. Did you give up some touchdowns and fall behind early? Of course. But it's not all their fault. I mean, they were put in some tough spots because, I mean, look, first drive of the game, Shane Beamer decided to run a fake punt, and it did not go well. And South Carolina's defense had to defend at the 36-yard line, and Ole Miss drove down and scored right away. So, again, it's not all on the defense, but they're still doing more than enough to keep you in the ballgame. It really does come down to South Carolina's offense moving forward. But it really is going to be a big challenge against this Alabama offense. Can the Gamecock defense continue to play well and keep the team in the ball games? We'll have to see, but I feel really good about where this defense is at right now, all things considered.
Mm-hmm. I think that Stewart penalty was really just a freshman mistake, and I'm glad that it's been addressed. But looking at the offense, do you think they're going to be playing Sellers for the whole time after kind of an abysmal game last week?
And I think I don't think it was an abysmal performance on Sellers' part necessarily. I don't know if that's the right word to put it. I will say it wasn't a great outing. I mean, you only scored 3 points, so obviously the numbers are not going to be as good when you're only scoring 3 points. The issue for South Carolina was it's not the fact that they drove around the field. They got over the 50 a few times in this game. I think it was like 6 or 7 times. The problem was when it came down to it on third down, you couldn't sustain the drives. You couldn't keep them going. You couldn't execute in the red zone. You only scored 3 points on a 40-yard field goal. So I think there's a lot of work to do for this offense, and especially for Sellers. I mean, look, he missed out on some of his key throws in this game, and it wasn't close on some throws. So he's got a lot of work to do in that aspect. And I think your question, Karenna, is kind of in reference to, are they going to play Robbie Ashford at all in this game? Because that obviously seemed to be what the Gamecocks were going to do, all things considered, against Ole Miss, but it didn't end up being that way because Robbie fumbled on his first play of the game when he came in early in the first quarter, and then obviously Ole Miss went down the other way and scored to take a 14-0 lead. So I don't know what we'll see this weekend. Sellers is going to start. He's going to play majority of the game. Are they going to try to get Robbie in there a little bit, maybe have some packages for him? Potentially. It wouldn't shock me if they do. They still have a lot of confidence in him despite his fumble that he had in that Ole Miss game. But I think this is Lenoris' team, obviously still. He's going to be out there, and I don't really expect Robbie to play a ton unless the situation presents itself where, hey, let's get him in there and have him go out there and make a few plays.
I think this is a key game for the Gamecocks because they have a rough month ahead of them. How do you think they can improve this week to help set them on a good path for the next couple weeks?
Yeah, and look, this month, as we knew coming into the year, was always going to be tough. Obviously, last year in October, they went winless, and it really kind of, I don't want to say derailed because they kind of came back to life in November, but it really sent the season down in somewhat of a spiral when You lost that bad game to Florida that you should have won, and things didn't really pick up from there. But as for this year, the month of October has been rough so far. You only scored 3 points against Ole Miss. It's not getting any easier when you have to go to Tuscaloosa this week, and then you're going to Norman to play Oklahoma for the first time next weekend, and then you go into the bye week. So there is a real possibility you could end this month 0-3, Karenna. But I will say, for South Carolina, there are ways they can win this game, and there are ways they can improve. So obviously, offense, anything is better than last week, I think. I mean, 3 points is 3 points. It wasn't good enough. I expect things to be much better this weekend. I think Lenore Sellers is going to be ready to go, fully healthy. I mean, look, it's not to say he wasn't last time out, but obviously coming off an injury, it's a little tough getting back out there with a little bit of rust to knock off and stuff. So I think he's going to be much better this time around. I'm expecting Rocket Sanders to be much better as well. He only had 8 carries against the Rebels and didn't really do a whole lot. Then again, Oscar Attaway was the starting running back in that game. And Rocket ended up seeing the most snaps at running back in that game. It's just he didn't really have a ton of production. So I think offensively, like I said before, Sellers has got to throw the ball better. The pass protection needs to be better. His receivers, they need to find a way to get open. I don't know how they're going to do it because they haven't really been able to do it consistently throughout this whole season, especially last week. There were a lot of times where Sellers was kind of scrambling out of the pocket trying to make a throw, but he kind of had to tuck it and run because he couldn't find an open man. So I think it's easier said than done. The play calling also just needs to be better, and so does the decision making. But I think there are ways they can get some more points on the board. It's just they got to be able to finish drives. That is number one. And then defensively, obviously, you need to continue to do what you do. Last week wasn't their best performance, but it certainly was not a terrible performance by any means. They kept South Carolina in the ball game for most of the way. It's just you got to be able to not get into an early hole, regardless of how your offense does. Because look, I'm not blaming the defense for falling behind 14-0, but you got to make stops wherever the ball is spotted, and that is a big key going to this game. I could definitely see South Carolina falling behind early and never really being able to recover. I just hope that's not the case because South Carolina really, really could use this win. I don't think they're going to get it, but they really do need this win as bad as anyone right now. Probably more so than Alabama because Alabama's going to be fine, I think. But Carolina, I mean, this is a year that you really need to make a bowl game, and it's going to get tougher from here when you get into November and stuff, and you're playing Missouri, Texas A&M, Clemson. Vanderbilt's even going to be a tough game now. I mean, there are no give-me's the rest of the way. So South Carolina really, really could use a win here. It's going to be tough, but hey, never say never, I guess, in this league.
Yeah, what do you think that road to victory is going to look like, either for Alabama or maybe South Carolina?
Yeah, so I'll start off with Alabama here. I think you need to continue to play well offensively, like you have been. I think you'd like to see Jalen Milroe take that interception back, but again, it's a fluky play overall. I think you'd like to get the running game a little bit more going, consistently at least. You had some nice runs in that game on the ground, but you like to have a little bit more production in the run game, and especially for Milroe. I mean, he only had 10 yards on the ground, and we know how good of a runner he is. So Vanderbilt was able to kind of take away his running ability and make him throw it a little bit more. So I think South Carolina needs to try to do that. But on the subject of the Crimson Tide, defense has got to be better. There's no question about it. You can't be letting South Carolina convert as much as Vanderbilt did on third down. I mean, 12 of 18 is absolutely ridiculous. And look, with how much South Carolina has struggled on third downs this season, it wouldn't shock me if that continues. But if South Carolina is able to generate enough positive third down conversions in this game, that's going to lead to longer sustainable drives and some more points potentially. So, look, this is a really big game for both teams. Alabama especially. They don't lose much coming off of losses. I mean, the last time they lost multiple games in a row was all the way back in 2013. So it's been a while. I know this is a different era of Crimson Tide football with Kalen DeBoer as the head coach. But again, this is a much more talented team, I would say, than South Carolina is, with all these 5- and 4-star, really elite players. There are no excuses for Alabama to lose this game. On the flip side, South Carolina, I think really, like I said before, they really need this win. But the path to victory is very, very tough. It's not going to be easy to go out and go from 3 points to 40 like Vanderbilt overnight. you really have to be able to play your best brand of football. That means defense cannot have mistakes. You need to be tackling, no offsides penalties. Offense, you got to be clicking. You got to finish in the red zone. You got to get there more often, and you got to be able to finish and not be taking 3 points when you could be going for 7. So, again, I don't really expect South Carolina to win this game, but I will say there are ways to get the job done. It's just you got to be able to execute and limit the mistakes as best you can.
All right, that's going to do it for us today, guys. The Gamecocks play the Crimson Tide at noon on ABC this Saturday. For Gamecock Central, I'm Karenna Porter.
I'm Jack Veltri. Be sure to stay tuned for all live coverage and updates throughout the weekend. I'll be in Tuscaloosa covering the game for Gamecock Central, and it should be a really good time regardless of results. But obviously, let's hope South Carolina finds their rhythm and gets back on track. So that's going to do it for us now. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you guys again next week.